basketball edition of Three True Values. We are here to keep you rolling with all the latest news and notes. So, now that we have gone through the coaching carousel, we have gone through the way too early rankings for 25-26, we have put the 24-25 season in the rear view mirror, talking about everything that has happened there. What is next? The NBA draft. We are going to start talking through some of the top prospects in the 2025 NBA draft cycle. Of course, some of this will twist and change. We still have a couple of weeks here before the entry deadline where players must put their name into the draft. And then we will have about a month or so where they are able to go through the process, work out for teams, go to the NBA Combine if they are invited, the G League Combine. Don't forget about that one for the players who were not invited to the big showcase. And from there, they will be able to, the underclassmen at least, who declare while retaining their eligibility, they will be given the option to withdraw. So we've got an extended timeline here where we can talk about players who are in, players who are out, and plenty more. So we're going to go ahead and start with a baseline here. We've talked a little NBA draft throughout the course of the regular season, but not a whole lot of it. So we're going to start a series here over the next few weeks where we're going to run through some of the position rankings. We're going to get you up to date on where these different players stand against their peers who play the same position. Once we get through that series, we will continue with all kinds of things, updated draft rankings, get you prepared for the NBA Combine, talk about the winners and losers from the Combine, because there's always some players who raise their stock, some who it becomes clear will need to go head back to college if they want to maximize their ability to improve. We will also, while we're doing this, go ahead and keep you up to date on the transfer situation. There's plenty of transfers out there, a lot of commitments that are popping pretty much every day. We've got something happening that is shaking up the way too early top 25. So we're not going to run you through every single thing that happened. We're going to try to keep you up to date with some of the bigger moves that have happened since we last talked. So without much further intro, let's go in depth on NBA draft prospects. We're going to start today in this first segment with the point guards. We will get to shooting guards in the second segment, and as I said, wrap up the show with transfer news and notes. So where do we start with the point guards? This is an interesting draft class at the point guard position. I think that there is some really, really good talent right up at the top. Then you get into the mix of players who have something that you really latch onto that you think could make them a very, very good NBA player, could bring them into that all-star status. But it's not all there. It's not all put together yet. That's a pretty big group of point guards in that category. Then you've got a nice little group that'll probably be a backup point guard at some point during their NBA career. Unfortunately, though, there is not a ton of depth at this position. This is not the position where every team can go ahead and select one and feel good about where they stand. It's just not. There is a lack of point guards, and it could drop even further. We've got a couple here who are probably in the category of draftable that would hear their name called, who I would lean towards them heading back to school at this point. So let's go ahead. Let's start right up at the top. Dylan Harper is the one. He is at the top of draft boards, right behind Cooper Flagg. He is the unquestioned number 2 in this draft class. Now, is he at Cooper Flagg's level? I don't think he's quite there, but I do put him in this category of top prospect who has separated from the field and has the chance to be an all-star caliber player in the NBA for sure. It's all there. He's got size for the position. He is an excellent facilitator. He runs the offense very well. He has shown an ability to score in a couple different ways, holds up pretty solid on the defensive end. I don't have a lot of questions there for him. And so this is just an all around really good NBA draft prospect who teams are going to be very happy to get if they land at number two. And I think that's part of why you see these teams, the numbers tanking that we have, because the late lottery is not loaded. And we'll get to that over the course of the next few weeks, but it's not just loaded with guys that you are 100% confident are worth the tank. But when you've got Cooper Flagg and you've got the presence of Dylan Harper, if you can get that second pick, well, then yeah, we'll take our chance. We'll go up there. We'll see if we can get the best odds. Now, the question for Harper is at Rutgers, things did not come together. I don't put all of that on him, but it is a question mark. It's interesting that they had two of the best players in college basketball and still were just not able to get it done at all. Now, Harper dealt with injuries on and off throughout the course of the year, and that definitely set them back. So for Harper, sure, there are questions, but I do think he is unquestionably in this top category of players that we have in the draft. Now, we get to this next tier, and I think this is the most fascinating tier to me. And I'll put Kasparas Yakachonis from Illinois in here. I'll put Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma here. And I'll put Nolan Traore from France in this category. I'll throw Yegor Dimon in here as well. I know he's further down the board, but I think they all kind of fit the same mold here of, man, if you buy into what they do well, if you buy into Yakachonis' overall ability to score, rebound, assist, play, if you buy that he can just do it all as a very tall point guard, man, there's a lot there. You're going to be happy that you land him. If you like Jeremiah Fears, if you say, man, that athleticism, that just raw scoring ability, what we've seen from him at this age as one of the youngest players in this draft class, if you buy that, you're going to be happy. Nolan Traore. I mean, this is a guy who was a projected top 5 pick not too long ago based on what he did over the summer against competition that was mostly his peers. Well, then he struggles when facing more grown men through the course of the regular season overseas. He has started to kind of figure it out. He looked much better over the back half of the season than he did in the early going. So there's still questions about him for sure. He does not have the big size that we've talked about with some of these other guards, but he's got that offensive gift. Like he can get downhill. He can do a lot. He's not a great shooter, but then again, I'm not sure anyone in this category classifies as a great shooter that we're talking about here. And that leads us to Yegor Dimon, who is definitely not a great shooter. That is the biggest glaring hole in his game. But if you want the best passer, hands down, the best passer in this class, it's Yegor Dimon. And he will enter the NBA and already be among a top group of passers. His court vision, his ability to find the right pass to throw, incredible. Now, with Yakachonis, the biggest issue that we have seen is turnovers. He just, whether it's misreading situations, whether it's just a sloppiness with the ball, he has turned it over way too much over the course of his freshman season. With Jeremiah Fears, it's inefficiency. Especially in big games against the best opponents, he has really struggled to find efficiency for large portions of the game. Way too many of his big outputs came when he had 2 points left with 10 minutes to go and they were down by 20. And then suddenly he ends the game with 16. But they still lose by 20. Like that's just not what you're looking for out of an NBA prospect. Like, if you go box score hunting, you're not going to get the full picture of how bad some of his games through the middle portion of the season really were. The tape was not very good for the first 35 minutes of some of those games. Nolan Traore, we talk about him. Well, he was really inefficient. Could not shoot the ball, could not finish at the rim particularly well against this step up in competition. Well, what is the NBA? That is the ultimate step up in competition. So you have questions, real questions. Igor Dimin, we just talked about. There were real problems with he cannot shoot the ball. He became too passive trying to score at times for BYU. And on top of that, he then started committing more turnovers, and they weren't turnovers from a lack of court vision, which we just talked about. It was a little bit of sloppiness with the ball. It was kind of a, well, I don't want to be responsible for shooting, so I'm going to make sure that I don't end up in that situation. So they all have great upside swings here, but they also have glaring holes in their game, which they have struggled to show significant growth through. So we've got this whole category here that's going to range somewhere from pick 5 all the way down into the 20s. They're going to be scattered in what order? We're not 100% sure. I think right now, Fears probably goes first among this group, although I have Yakachonis graded a little bit higher because I do think that Fears is multiple years away from being able to contribute with any sort of efficiency. Yakachonis, he's got the body to do it. It's about locking in those details, avoiding being sloppy with the ball. So there's a lot to unpack with this group, and we will unpack it throughout the course of the offseason as draft boards get finalized. There's a lot that's going to happen over these next few weeks, these next couple of months, to determine where these players are all going to land on the board. But let's go ahead. Let's drop down a little bit into the late first round. The players who are on the board and available, kind of to be, if we're separating out here. If we say Dylan Harper's in his own class, we classify all of those guys together. This is group 2B. And I say that because Walter Clayton headlines this group and was not near this group until early March. Now, his March Madness run, his run to a national championship, no doubt raised his stock significantly. But it is very important to not just get sucked into the moment. What he did during the NCAA tournament can be an indicator that you need to go back and look at things, that you need to evaluate his growth, his consistency, his overall skill set. But you don't want to just move a guy from the end of the second round all the way up into the 20s or teens just because he had a good run of 4 or 5 games. And that's not what we're doing here with Clayton. What we're doing here is we're going back and we're looking and we're saying, okay, what was the biggest question mark? Well, it was his ability to act as a true point guard, to facilitate the offense. Well, in that national championship game, I think he did as much for his stock as any of those other games. Yes, he struggled for large portions of that game to score, but he racked up assists. When they brought the double, when they forced him to move laterally across the court rather than north and south, once he realized the only shot he could get off was an NBA 3, he quickly started making the correct pass. He was finding the cutter. He was throwing the ball across the court for the mismatch. He was finding the open man in the corner. Everything that you would want your point guard to do when he's facing a double team. And that is going to be huge for Clayton, who does not have great size, but has a huge scoring ability. We knew that. I think it's gotten better over the course of the year at Florida, actually. I think he has continued to grow this whole year. I think what we saw in the NCAA tournament was kind of the accumulation of, if you go back and look, there's kind of a flip that got switched. And suddenly he went from some big games, some lesser games, just kind of riding the wave, to it was big night after big night after big night. Like he got on a roll some point between January and February, and he never let his foot off the gas there and continued to actually improve what he was able to do. So I think that was huge for Florida, obviously, but for his draft stock to show that it was not just a hot streak. This guy continued to put up that kind of production. So Walter Clayton, huge rise, but there's still going to be questions about his game, right? There's still questions about the size. There's still questions about being a full time point guard. Can he be a backup point guard? For sure. I think he's established that. But now what teams want to know is, can he take on that kind of starting role? And there's just so few people who fit his mold who have been able to have great success in recent years. So we look at the other ones in this category. And I go LeBaron Philon from Alabama. Now, he has some different issues. We know that he brings the intensity. We know that he will play the defense. He will get downhill. He will use his athleticism. He's got all of those pieces. But he does not shoot the ball efficiently, particularly from deep. And there's some mechanics, some things that from a freshman guard you want to clean up. I think that some people might have advised him to come back for one more year, clean all those things up, and potentially be a lottery pick. Like, that's the kind of talent that this guy has. I am of the opinion, though, while I have him here at this end of the tail end of the first round kind of group, I'm of the opinion he's going to be a lock in the first round. I think that some team is going to fall in love with what he brings, and they're going to make sure that they land him in the first round somewhere, whether it's in the 20s, whether that means that he gets all the way up to the teens with a team trying to protect their ability to get him. Somebody's going to love the intensity, the upside, the just everything that he brings, and they're going to say, look, we have other shooters on this roster. We want you to come in and provide that spark. But there's room to grow. Lots of room to grow there. Boogie Fland, another one. We just didn't get to see him all year. He was higher on these boards because of his electric offense, what he was showing for Arkansas early in the year. But then we didn't get to see him due to injury. Now he declares for the draft, and we're going to find out. I think that no one's off-season performance through the combine, through private workouts is more important than Boogie Fland's, because it could be the difference between him returning up into the teens and falling even further down into the second round, where some teams just say we don't have enough data on him. So he will be a very fascinating one to watch. And then the last player in this group, and actually he's the highest rated on my board in this group, but wanted to go through some of those more established college players first, is Sergio Delaria from Spain. Now, this is a guy who is not a household name yet. He's an international prospect who is playing decent minutes, but not huge minutes for his club in Europe, and shooting 45% from three. He has size. He handles the ball with the second unit. Now that's where some of the projection comes in here. That's where the questions of, well, he's not the starting point guard. He doesn't handle the ball the entirety of the game. Yes, but I don't think he looks bad doing it. I think that there's some real question marks defensively for him. He has not faced the level of athlete that he's going to face, and has not held up incredibly well when you look at the analytics, the defensive rating, things of that nature. But with his size, with his shooting, I think that he is an extremely valuable piece regardless of where everything else falls. Worst case, he can come in off the bench and provide you just floor spacing and another ball handler. There's a lot of teams that would take that right now. So we've now gone through 9 point guards, and we're out of point guards who I think have a chance to be taken in the first round. If you really wanted to dig and say who could have a huge performance through these offseason workouts and work their way up to the first round, I think that there's 2 names. I think it's Milos Uzan from Houston, who, as we know, declares for the draft after he has a breakout into the season. He came into that Houston team and was just another piece. Suddenly, it became more and more clear that he was going to be if not the offensive engine, a big piece to them scoring on offense. So he continued to develop. We know he has the toughness. We know he'll play defense coming out of that Houston system. So he will have value. It'll be interesting to see how high it can climb over the course of things. And the last one is Tahad Pettiford at Auburn. Now, this is an interesting one because I think he's probably going to head back to school. That would be my guess at this point. I think most likely outcome is Tahad Pettiford returns to Auburn, plays point guard for them next season. But he's in the pre-draft prospect. He's a projected second-round pick. And so if he gets in front of a team that really likes what he offers, now he's one of the smaller point guards in this draft class, but again, if you're looking for a backup point guard, that doesn't necessarily rule him out. If you're looking for the things that he does provide and you really like that, I mean, he's got some scoring punch. He's got a lot of upside as a guy who could go get buckets for you. The competitive fire is there for sure. And he's kind of already answered a couple of questions about being too small while playing in college. Now it's a completely different game. There's more questions in the NBA than there are in college about small players, but I don't think we should completely rule him out just because we know he's got an offer to go back to Auburn, which means if a team really likes him, they have to take him higher. He's got to get that guaranteed deal and go ahead and make it straight into the league. None of this back and forth to the G League. He's already got a bigger offer than what they're able to offer him. So that is a rundown on the point guards in the NBA draft class as of right now. A couple of those, as I said, they have the option to go back to school. Some of them, we will see how their stock changes over the course of the next few months. When we come back on the other side, though, we will talk through some of the shooting guards in this draft class. Welcome back in to Three True Values as we continue to talk NBA draft, big boards. We're on to the shooting guards, and it is time to start discussing what might be the deepest group that we are going to talk about. I mean, we could legitimately right now talk about 20 to 25 names who I think are draftable at this position. So we'll get into it. We'll go ahead and start talking. At the top, there are two. Well, you could throw a third one in there, really, but we're going to talk about the two first, and then we'll get to the third one. I have Trey Johnson above VJ Edgecombe. Now, that's not a super popular opinion, but I just love Trey Johnson's scoring ability. I think that he is one of the best offensive players in this draft. I think he is the kind of guy who you can trust to put the ball in his hand and let him go to work. And he is going to hit big shots for you. I really do think that he can be one of the best scorers at the guard position in the NBA by the time he reaches his prime. And that kind of upside, it's just hard to pass up. Now, are there questions that he will have to answer on defense if he wants to become an all-star level player? Yes. Does he need to round out his ability as a passer? Now, some people don't believe he can pass the ball. They think that he's just an ISO player. I don't see that. I think he actually makes a couple of really good reads. It's just that at Texas, he was never asked to do that. In high school, obviously, he never would have been asked to do that much. So I still believe he has some of that in his game, and that his ceiling really will come down to how much he can unlock the rest of that, how much he can learn as he continues to play. So really high on Trey Johnson, especially compared to a lot of other people. VJ Edgecombe, on the other hand, I'm not particularly lower on, but I don't see some of the top end outcomes that people sometimes discuss. I think that there's a small group that will put VJ Edgecombe closer to Dylan Harper than they do to Trey Johnson and Ace Bailey. And I just don't see that. VJ Edgecombe is a really good wing player. He has the length, he has the athleticism, um, he's good scoring the ball. He's very well rounded for a shooting guard in this class. My question on VJ, though, is that the consistency just never really locked in at Baylor. We never saw him just go on a tear where it was big performance, big performance, big performance. We saw that out of Trey. We did not from him. We saw big games, but it was not, 30 points, 25 points, 21 points, 30 points again. Like that run just didn't happen. And we can talk about what was surrounding him, but I do think what was surrounding him was better than what Trey had around him. So I'm not 100% sure what all led to that, but I will say, if we're going to make comparisons, I think that VJ is a little bit better overall. I like the projection better than former Baylor guard Jacoby Walter last year, but they suffered a lot of the same question marks. It was a lot of, well, why wasn't it more consistent over the course of the year? And Walter's still figuring things out in the NBA, did not have a huge impact in year one. So I think that there's more question marks for VJ than we regularly discuss. I want to see more consistency out of him. I want to see some big performances throughout the offseason. I want to see him kind of get back into what he had with the Bahamas when he looked like he might be the best player out there with NBA guys on the court. That's what we want to get back to, what we want to see. Now, this third player who's maybe a half tier below those two is Cone Knippel. And Cone is going to go in the lottery. Have no question about that. With his ability to shoot, with his ability to hold up defensively. Now, he is not a lockdown perimeter defender. He's not going to just, take away their best perimeter option by any means, but he holds up. He's where he needs to be. Good in the team construct. He understands spacing. He understands how to stay between his man and the goal. I think he was underrated on that end, and I think that what he provides you as a shooter, some team is going to have to bite, particularly some of these teams that are in the lottery, but their team is better than that have that pick because they traded for the pick. I think that group of teams is going to have very high interest in bringing in Cone Knippel to their squad. We get into this next group, and it's a little bit of a smaller tier as well. Jace Richardson from Michigan State, a little bit undersized. His role obviously increased, and then we saw a big increase in his production as well, so that's interesting. Clearly, Tom Izzo trusted him more as the season went along. We know that. I think that the numbers are pretty solid. It's just a question of how does it all directly translate? Because I feel like Jace Richardson does everything very quietly. And it's a little bit surprising, given that his dad was Jason Richardson, known for more of the athleticism, more of the in-your-face type of impact. Jace is a very quiet contributor. He's going to play solid defense. He's going to run the offense well. He's going to be in the right spot. He just feels like he plays really good basketball. He's got plenty to clean up, plenty to improve on if he wants to be a impact type of player. But he's a guy who I think you can stick out there on the court and tell him his role, and he's just going to fill it. No questions asked. It's not going to be flashy. It's not going to draw attention away from your stars. You can trust him to go do his job. I think there's a lot of teams that will be very interested in that type of skill set. And then Ben Serif from Israel, kind of the opposite. Ben Serif has been an interesting prospect. He's all over people's boards, I feel like. You might see him top 10. You might see him outside the first round. This is a guy who has really good offensive instincts. I think that what people project or want him to be is that kind of sixth man who you can just hand the ball to, and he just is the offense. Now, the issue that he faces, what he will have to work on, he cannot shoot the three very well. And when your game is predicated on getting downhill, getting to the rim, pull ups, all kinds of, shaking defenders free and getting somewhere, having that 3-pointer in your back pocket is very important to maximizing your ability. Because if not, they're going to pack the paint on you. And then getting past your defender becomes infinitely more difficult. So we'll see how that continues to develop. We'll see how he develops after coming to the NBA. Then we get into this nice group of shooting guards who I think maybe the first round, probably early second, but definitely going to play in the NBA if they declare. Some of them can still go back to college, but we've got Adou Thiero, who I find interesting because he really upped his offensive game, showed that he can get to the basket, showed that he can play with the ball in his hands a little bit. He's a good cutter. And that adds so much to his defense. That's Adou Thiero at Arkansas, who can be a really good perimeter defender and showed some upside on offense. So I think that there are going to be teams who look at that and say, all right, what can we turn this guy into? Because as we know, a defensive stopper on the perimeter is in high demand. There are teams all over the league looking for who they can trust to do that job. And if he can do it while also having the instincts to play on offense, it's going to make him very valuable in the NBA. You look at Cam Jones, a guy who played point guard most of this year, but is a natural shooting guard. I think he raised his stock a lot by running the offense at Marquette, because if he was just a shooting guard, there's questions, height, the versatility of his game. There were questions last year that kept him in college. We'll just say it like that. But when you add in that he can be your secondary ball handler, that he could come in and run a second unit if you need him to, he can work on or off the ball now. Well, that makes him much more valuable to a team. And so I do think that he has got a chance, just based on his ability to play whatever role he is asked, to go at the tail end of the first round. If not that, definitely early in the second. We look at Isaiah Evans from Duke. I think he's most likely to either withdraw or just not enter the draft at this point. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on him, but he is an elite 3-point shooter. I mean, this dude came in for Duke ice cold and just three, like felt like he was shooting 65% or better from three. I mean, it was insane down the back stretch of the season. The problem is he can't stay on the floor right now because he is still not holding up on the defensive end. He's got to get that figured out. If he can play on defense, he will stay on the floor, he will space the floor, and he will raise his stock dramatically for next season. And finally, to round out this group, we've got Darion Williams from Texas Tech. He's going through the draft process and could return. He's in the transfer portal, so he could go somewhere else. But he does have a little bit of that same thing that we were talking about with Thiero. We know he can play defense. We know that he can contribute on offense in a couple of different ways. So where does that put his stock? I think that it makes him very valuable, and we will see if anyone is willing to give him a guaranteed deal that could entice him to stay in the draft. Now, I want to wrap up here. I don't want to go through just all of these players because we've got so many in this shooting guard kind of class. But I do want to run through a couple more who I am just high on. I think you've got Chaz Lanier at Tennessee. The scoring punch, I don't know how much it directly translates in the NBA because he would be taking on so much lesser of a role when he steps into things. But I do think he is definitely a candidate who, if he's not on an NBA roster, he will be on a G League roster for sure. Elijah Martin, somebody that I'm very high on. Look, he's small for the position, but he is a dog. He is going to go out there and fight on both ends of the floor. I know that that guy is going to play as hard as anyone every night. And that's the kind of player that teams really like having at the end of the bench. So if he's willing to accept that role, to just when his name is called, go out there and play as hard as he can, there is a spot for him in the NBA for sure. Whether that's on a two-way to start and he gets upgraded, we see that all the time. Or if somebody just says, look, we know what you're going to bring us, we're going to put you on an NBA deal. Whichever way it goes, that guy is going to play in the NBA. I can guarantee you. Max Shulga is a really interesting one, a real translation project. You've got to figure out how does what he did at VCU, where he was a really good defender and kind of an offensive engine for that team, how does that translate to the NBA? He's taking such a big leap up in competition, but there's a lot of fascinating stuff there. John Tonje, look, he had 1 year where he was just an unstoppable offensive force. How does that translate? Dink Pate, who kind of got stuck in that G League Ignite system. Now he's playing with the Capitanes, and I don't know. I really don't know, because this G League pathway has been so bad for prospects, and he spent multiple years in it. I have no idea where his draft stock stands. I don't know if somebody's going to just take a big swing at him saying, look, he looks the part, or if teams are just going to pass on him and say, look, he was rotting away in the G League undeveloped. He's too far behind. No idea where things are going to stand with Dink Pate at this point. Jackson Robinson from Kentucky, I think he's a little underrated. He's shifty. He's got the ability to handle the ball. He can shoot threes at a high level. He's got the height to be a three if you really want him to play there. I think he's got a lot of versatility. I think he should be definitely in the mix to be selected in the NBA draft this year. And then we get down towards the bottom, and I do want to talk about Jaron Pierre, who is now committed to SMU, but also going through the draft process. From Jacksonville State, this is a guy who looks like he might have something, but he's coming from a lower level. He's going to go through the draft process and see where he stacks up against these players, and we're going to find out a lot about him because he's going to face more his peers than being the best player on the court every night out. So that will be an interesting storyline to follow. Can he raise his stock enough to stay in the draft, or will he head to SMU? When we come back, on the other side, we're going to get you through some of the latest transfer news. We're going to talk through some of the big storylines that we've been following and then get you out of here. Thank you for listening right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back in. This is the last segment of this week's episode here on 3 True Values. We're going to take you through some of the biggest transfer news that we've had over the past week or so, starting with Rob Wright to BYU. That's right. The point guard formerly at Baylor had a big freshman season, went a little bit under the radar, but no doubt that was noticed by BYU, who reportedly made a big NIL investment to bring a point guard onto campus to help lead AJ DeBonsa's group. So I think that is a huge development for this BYU team and for college basketball next season, because now you have got the top-rated freshman with a very high-level point guard next to him out on the floor. So that's where things start. We get Ade Mara from UCLA to Michigan. That's an interesting one there. If they're able to get back Yaxel Lindeborg and keep Morez Johnson, having Ade Mara off the bench would make them not only one of the best and most versatile front courts in America, it would make them one of the deepest front courts in America. That would be quite something to watch. I think it would be really fascinating to see if they all three show up on campus there. Caleb Glenn to Michigan State. Tom Izzo on the board in the transfer portal. Who would have thought? But he gets an FAU transfer who is moving up, will play the forward position for them. We know that he is much more open to having having transfers moving up from mid majors to the high major level than he is to go get maybe a 5-star who didn't work out at another school. Xavier loading up. They've added so many that I don't know if we can go through all of them right now, but they have really got things going under Richard Pitino, building that roster out quickly in the portal. I like a lot of what they have done. I think they're going to start moving quickly up boards this offseason. Jakari Lane from North Alabama, one of the best mid-major scorers that we're going to see. He goes to Texas A&M. I think that'll be a fascinating one. See how he can handle the SEC level of competition. Darian Reed then enters the portal from Alabama. Early indications are that he will at least receive interest from NC State. Of course, he entered the portal with a no contact tag, which does not necessarily mean that he knew where he was going, but it's an indication he at least knew where he wanted to look. And NC State is the first place he is going to check out with Will Wade. Speaking of Will Wade, they also landed their first big fish in Trey Holloman. And I think that the addition of Trey Holloman was important for this reason. They went out, they got a tough nose, grinded out point guard for this unit. And he's a veteran, he's a leader, most importantly. Which means now as they go out and they fill out the roster, when guys come in, there's kind of a player representing them, whether it's on the visit, having a conversation, whether it's texting before and after. They're trying to get an idea of what they're coming into. And with a guy like Trey Holloman already in the fold, you've got a certain level of cachet that's already there. If that guy is bought in, it's easier to buy in. So that was a big first get for this NC State staff. They're in the mix for quite a few other players who would really, really raise the stock of this roster. We'll see how many of them they're able to land over the next couple of weeks as we talk through things. Keyshawn Murphy ends up at Auburn. That's going to be a big one. He is a very talented power forward who will kind of step in and be a go-to option for this Auburn team that had so much success with its forwards and bigs this season. Step right in and try to make an impact there. Lamar Wilkerson, now this was maybe the storyline of the week, honestly. Lamar Wilkerson commits to Indiana after people at Kentucky seemed pretty convinced that he was coming there. Seems like there's quite a few hurt feelings from Big Blue Nation. They're now moving on and going through the stages of grief. Of course, you got your denial, saying that they didn't want him anyways. There's tweets that suggest that's not true, but they'll work their way through it. And we'll see, because Indiana and Kentucky face each other this season. So that's going to be a must-watch game now even more. I mean, it was two blue bloods going head-to-head, a new coach at one spot, Mark Pope building this thing back up with an incredible roster already in the fold. Now it's going to be just that much better with this kind of hatred that the fan base seems to have towards Lamar Wilkerson and his decision to spurn them for Indiana and then go out and say he didn't want to just be another guy at Kentucky. Not entirely sure what that means, but I think if he's talking about the actual roster itself, it could be an indication. And this is something that I think it's mostly been perceived as a historical kind of, I just don't want to be another name that went to Kentucky. I think that's the way that most people have taken it. And so they've kind of pointed to, hey, you went to Indiana. That's a blue blood program. What are you talking about? Well, if you look at recent years, I think that there's a case. Like, there's not a lot of Indiana talent that is kind of associated as a star at Indiana who went on to have success in the NBA currently in the league. There's a couple of names out there for sure, but they have not had the kind of success in recent years that they had historically. So I think that there's a case. Maybe that's what he was talking about. Kentucky, you go to the NBA and then they're all Kentucky players. But what if he's talking about this particular roster? that he didn't just want to be another guy at Kentucky. Because we know Mark Pope's system is very much team centric. It is all about the greater good. It's all about coming together as one unit. And if he didn't want to be just another guy at Kentucky who never gets credit for all the big moments, I can see that too. Because if he wants to go be a star player, well, at Indiana, he is going to probably be the go to guy. I would imagine he's going to have the ball in his hands most of the time, and that he is going to be the one taking big shots in the big moments, who's going to get a lot of credit when they win or blame when they lose. So I can see that. And that's part of the whole Mark Pope thing of, if this is going to be a very team centric program, that's really, really good in a lot of aspects. But there's going to be a couple of guys who have that kind of superstar mentality who just are turned off by the idea that they're going to be treated equal to other players. It's going to happen. So if that's what ruled them out, I'm not too concerned for Kentucky. They've got plenty of other options out there. I think that they've got more to come, and they don't have that many spots left to fill on the roster to begin with. They have got a really good group already. So we'll see what they are able to do over the next couple of weeks at Kentucky to fill that hole. Indiana has already continued. They have landed a couple more guys to that backcourt as well. Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle commit to Arkansas on the same night. So Arkansas shores up its front court. Things are pretty much set at that position, with Trayvon Brazile also presumed to be back at this point. So what do they finish things out with at the forward spots? Do they add anything to that backcourt, which we know has already 2 5-star freshmen coming in and DJ Wagner potentially back as well? We will see what John Calipari finishes things out with there. Mustafa Tiam enters the portal. This is a huge one. I mean, like, massive. Not just that he's massive, but like big news. This guy is going to get millions to play college basketball this year, wherever he commits. There's some talk already that he was offered millions from another Big 12 program. We will see what that ends up being. This is a guy who is going to be in the top 20 of my first 2026 NBA draft. He is an elite rim protector. He is continuing to learn the game. And man, he looks like he has limitless potential as a athletic rim protecting center. And that is extremely valuable. I don't care what level of basketball you're playing. A 7-footer who can fly around and block shots is always going to be one of the most valuable things in the sport. He is that, and I'm buying it. I think he's one of the best players in the transfer portal, hands down. I don't think that there's many players in the country who I would take above him if I was looking to anchor my defense. So he is now on the market. We'll see how many teams get involved with him. And then Xavier Lee commits to Florida just last night. That was big for the Gators. They get their point guard of the future, at least this season. He's going to come in. There's going to be a lot of Walter Clayton comparisons, of course. I don't think you can avoid that after what Walter Clayton just did. He is a big-time scorer. He did it at the Ivy League level, but did it against bigger teams when he got the opportunity. So I do think the translation is there. He's a guy who was on the fringe of NBA draft conversations as well. A guy who probably, if he had entered, would have been in the discussion as a late second-round pick or a potential invite for Summer League, where he would then fight for a 2-way contract. So this is a really talented player, just about where Walter Clayton was in draft conversations at the end of last season. So we'll see if he can raise his stock the same way Clayton did over his time at Florida, at least the last year at Florida. It's going to be fun to watch this Florida team try to defend its title, because they do have a lot of these role players who can come back. None of them have entered the transfer portal so far. We will see over the rest of the offseason how they can fill out the final spots of this roster, who they can keep, who ends up heading to the NBA draft, because they've got a couple of guys who we'll talk about over the next couple of episodes who could be in that mix, unless they're able to reach NIL agreements to come back to Florida next season. We will be back next week with more of the latest transfer news and talking about small forwards and power forwards in the NBA draft class. You won't want to miss it. So come right back here to Three True Values. Thank you for tuning in.